in listen-only mode.
Hi folks, it's a minute after 11. I'm going to give 2 minutes after 11. I'm going to give people another minute or so to get on the call, and then we will start. Thank you all very much. If you have any trouble seeing anything, when we first logged in, Emily and I were tweaking with the settings because it wasn't showing correctly. If you're having any troubles seeing or even hearing, please drop a note in the chat. Also, as we are going through this, I will have points where I'm going to stop and ask for questions, but don't wait for that. Go ahead and put any questions you have as we go along in the chat, and we will try and address them either as we're going or at the different stopping points along the way. All right, so let's go ahead and start the recording. All right, welcome to today's brown bag session on the user-defined reports in OneNFP and OneNFP Lite. I am your hostess, Jessica. I'm the product manager for Financials and Financials Lite. So the user-defined reports, you've probably already heard the spiel, but let's go through it. The user-defined reports are a combination of row layouts and column layouts, and you define those separately, and then combining them creates a report. So what this allows you to do is have several row layouts and column layouts and create exponentially or multiplication of those number of reports. So let's start by looking at the row layout. All right, I went to administration and row layouts. I have several here.
Jessica, this is Emily. I'm so sorry to interrupt. It sounds like some folks are having a hard time seeing the screen. So if you just let me know in the questions or the chat if you can see it now.
Okay. Yeah, let me know.
You have the ability to go to full screen in GoToMeeting. There should be a box up in the right-hand corner that allows you to do that if that's something that you might want to try from your end as well. Sorry to interrupt, Jess.
No, that's okay. If folks aren't able to see it, we want to make sure that we know about it and can fix the issue. So please let us know if that has helped.
Okay, and I'm not seeing any other comments coming in, so perhaps it's resolved. Thanks, Jess.
Okay. All right, so we're going to go into our row layouts. I'm going to start with this expense detail. This is a very basic kind of row layout. So what you need to understand with row layouts is they're all in some way or another going to tie back to an account or a group of accounts. So this is pretty basic because really what I'm doing is every single one of my accounts is a separate row. I've defined the account number there. So that's a straightforward way of doing your row layout. So let's take a look and just start over and move across cell by cell. Line number is what is going to tell the software what order a row needs to appear in the report. So if I wanted to add a new row, I could add that, and I'd want it, if I wanted it between these two, I'd have to number it between 10,000 and 20,000. That's a much bigger range than I usually use. I tend to use about 100 between the line numbers, so it gives me cushion to add lines. But that's my biggest tip, is to make sure you put a little cushion when you're creating your own row layouts. You really don't want to number them line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because then you'd have to renumber if you wanted to insert a line. Row number, this is an alphanumeric field, and it's actually something you use for reference. Right now in this version, or in this row layout, I'm using the account number, but I could just as easily call this expenses or EXP. Where you'll use that is if you then do a formula. When you put a formula in here if you want to, say, add two rows together. You're going to use the row number in the totaling in this field to do that. Description, that's what's actually going to show up on your report. So you may have a row layout that's very like mine with account names, but you may produce it for an external audience, so you want to tweak the account names. And you can do that right here. And this is only in the row. It has nothing to do with actually what the account is named. So totaling, this is where you're going to put what account you're pointing back to. It can be a single account, it can be a range of accounts, it could be a formula. This is saying, telling the software what it is, where the number is, where the financial information is that you are using in this row of the report. Totaling type. This is pretty critical when you're putting this together. So if you use a single account, like I have in this example, I need to make sure that the totaling type matches the account type that I have defined on that row. So if this is a total account here, this 5100, if I change that to posting, the software is going to look for transactions posted to 5100, but because it's a totaling account, there are none, so I'd get nothing returned back. So if you have a range of accounts, you would put posting there, is my recommendation. So if I had this defined as 5100 through 5200, what I'd want to do is say posting, and then it will get all the transactions posted to accounts within that range. Let me change that back so I don't mess myself up. And that back. New page, most of the rest of these are fairly straightforward. New page, you get a new page with that line. Show is a nice feature. Sometimes you're going to have rows that you don't want to show. For example, if all the columns are 0, you can exclude the line and make your report a little simpler. No is another option that is really nice. When you're doing these reports, you don't have to think of every row as being something that is included in the report. It may be you want to collect a piece of information that you use in a formula later down the line. So the row you need to have there so that you're getting that information, but you don't actually want to produce it in the report. So that's a good use of that option. Bold, italics, and underline. Show opposite sign is a nice option. Those of you familiar with the system, you know revenues come across as negative, expenses as positive, but to an external audience, that doesn't always make sense. So you can change how the number is reported in the report, how it's shown in the report. Row type, I recommend you leave as net change unless you've got a very specific reason to change that. The column layouts have this exact kind of setting, so you want to be careful of conflicts. And that's true a lot of these settings. You want to be very careful what you're doing, or you could wind up conflicting and ultimately filtering out any result and getting a return of 0 in the report. Amount type, most of the time I think you're going to pick net amount. There might be occasions when you want to see only debits or only credits, but usually net amount is what you'd have there. Transaction types, budgets, funds, fund class, cost center, these are all going to allow you to filter the transactions you get returned in the report results. So let me take a look at another row layout to show you a little different idea. So that first one was very basic. Every account had its own line. This time I'm using a range. This, in my sample data, is my net asset account through the end of my expense accounts. And I'm using a filter over here by fund. So while the row layout is based on a GL account, the rows are really showing me my fund balances. So don't get stuck into thinking that every row has to relate to a GL account. You can use the GL accounts and filters to actually return different kind of information. So that's the row layout. Basic, quick overview of that. Questions? I'll give people a second to type. One of the downsides to the row layouts, I have to say, is if I decide to add an account, I need to come in and say I've added an account to my GL GL accounts, I would need to come in and add it in here. So let's say I added a 5115. I'd have to add it in here to add that line in. So there is a certain amount of manual effort to maintaining them. On the plus side, really not a lot of clients change their chart of accounts frequently once they've got it set. All right, no Em, are you seeing questions come in?
No, I'm not, Jess.
Okay. All right, then I was looking at the wrong control on the control panel, so I wasn't seeing the questions. All right, so let's move. So those are the row layouts. Again, these are separate pieces. The nice thing there is expense detail. That's one you're going to want to see often. What's nice is I have one row layout, and I could have 4 different column layouts I use with it, and I'm creating 4 different reports. So let's go to the column layouts. All right, let's take a look at a simple budget to actual. All right, so this is a simple 2-column report. If we take a look, line number works the same way as in the row layout. This tells you the order that you are building the report, the columns that will appear from left to right in this order. Again, I would pad by whatever number you want, but I would not just list 1, 2, 3, because it just doesn't give you any room for modifying it easily. You can always renumber the lines, but it's just easier to have the numbers padded. Column number, same kind of thing, where it is a reference that you can then use. This could just as easily say budget and actual. Now column type. This is really the heart of the column layout. So let's walk through this a bit. Formula means you're actually calculating the value. So for example, if I wanted to add a column here for total, I could do, or the difference, the variance. If I made that formula, I could say budget minus actuals. So I'm using the column number to do the calculation. So that would be an example of a formula. Net change is going to give you the amounts posted to the accounts listed in the row layout or the combination of accounts during the period that you enter for the report start and end date. It's going to look, so if you put in a report date of March 1 to March 31, all you're going to get in that column is what was posted during that period. Balance at date, using that March 1/31 date, it's actually going to take the day before, so it will look at the balance on the accounts defined as of February 28 or 29 in a leap year. Or no, sorry, that's beginning balance. Got those mixed up. That was beginning balance is going to take you the day before your report range. Balance at date is going to be the last day of your report range. So that March 1 to March 31, it's going to give you the balance as of March 31. Year to date will take your fiscal year through that last date of your report period. Rest of fiscal year will take the day after, so our March 1 to March 31 report period. Rest of fiscal year will take April 1 through the end of my fiscal year. And entire fiscal year will do your whole fiscal year. So you can see where, let's click analysis and look at this for a moment. This the from and to dates, what you get in your columns will vary based on how you've defined the column and what your dates are. So you want to be very aware of how you've used these settings and how you're using it to produce the report. Much of the time you're going to use net change, I believe, or some combination of year-to-date, balance at date. Net amount, we saw a similar setting on column layout where you've got, this is the total, you could have it debit or just credit. Not a lot of clients use that except under very specific criteria. Formula is where if I were using a formula, I enter that. Show opposite sign, same as the other In the row layout, it's a nice feature for, especially for external audiences. Show is another option similar to the row layout where if I don't want to show the column, maybe, again, I'm using it in a calculation. You can exclude it from the report, but it would be there for you to collect the data that then is used in a formula. Rounding factor, not a lot of clients use this, mostly because we're accounting types and we want the actual specific to the penny information, but you could round your numbers if you needed to. Again, external report, maybe that's what you'd like to do. Comparison date and comparison period, let's come back to this in a second because I've got some examples to show you for that, but that basically allows you to manipulate what periods you're looking at. Transaction type, this allows you, as you're looking at what's been posted to your general ledger, everything will have a transaction type. Actuals have a transaction type of actual, budget has a transaction type of budget. And then similar to the row layouts, you've got the same kind of filtering, budget plan, speed key, funds, dimensions. So let's take a look at...
Hey, Jess.
Hang on a second. I have to... Sure.
We got a request. If you could just go over the net change again, please.
Sure. So let's take a look at that. So net change is going to show you what's in your report period, the start and end. So we've got net change. If I click analysis to see my report, my from and to date are December 1 to December 31. So what I'm seeing in a column that's defined for net change are only entries that are posted between December 1 and December 31. So if I drill down on that, you can see all our entries are going to be only within that period that we've stated. Actuals might have, I did all my budget on the first day of the month, but I'm only getting entries between December 1 and December 31 because the column type is net change and my report period is December 1 to December 31. Okay, and one of the good tips I can give you is when you drill down, you look at analysis. Analysis is very handy to use while you're creating your reports and you're working, you get access to it from the row layout or the column layout. You can continue building your reports and then see how it looks and then toggle back and forth between analysis and then the column or the row definition. But if I drill down on an entry and click navigate, show filters here will show you what the filters are that it's using. So it's looking at this account and it's looking at this date range. So I definitely recommend you using that as you're building these, especially if the data doesn't look quite like you think it is, it may be one of the filter settings is working in a way that you're not expecting. Okay? All right, so let me move to, hang on a second, I have to flip to my notes. All right. So comparison date is what I use more often than comparison period. There's a lot of detailed information on these in the online help. What this does basically is say, so I'm using net change. So if we previewed this, my period is December 1, 2014 to December 31, 2014. But by using this minus 1 year, this column is actually going to look at December 1, 2013 to December 31, 2013. So it's using the month and the day of your report period because we've said net change, but it's taking it back a year because I've said minus 1Y. So I can also do, there are several different combinations you can use. Minus 1M is a month. There are examples in the online help. You can also use, let's see, here's an example where my fiscal year is January to December. So what I'm using here to calculate is I'm saying add a month to get my different months of the fiscal year so that I can have a column for each one of my fiscal years. So comparison dates can be complicated to understand and work with a bit until you get the hang of it. I definitely would suggest you take a look at the online help and take a look at some of the column layouts. Your system should come predefined with several column layouts. Take a look at some of those because we use comparison dates in creating those. So that will also help you take a look at, see how they work. And then, as I said, when you go ahead and do analysis, so let's make this 0114 to 013114. My date range, it's now taking, if I drill down on that one column and see show filters, I can see exactly what date it's looking at, and I can see exactly what impact the comparison date entry is having on my results. So it's very useful when, trust me, as someone who has built several of these, it's easy to build something that is giving you results you don't quite expect. So that drill down and the show filters will help you quite a bit as you're working in these. All right, so let's see, hang on, refer back to my notes. All right, so let's do one more quick look at this one. And this one has a little bit greater complexity to the formula. I want to take a moment to point these out to you. So in this one, I'm doing a simple mathematical add of these two columns and then a subtraction. So I've totaled my original budget and revised budget in column B3, and then I'm subtracting actuals from my overall budget here, and then calculating a percentage. You can do a more detailed layout of the calculation of a percentage with parentheses and division and then multiply by 100, but a nice trick is to just do this slash, to take the actual divided by the overall budget and use a slash. So if we take a look at that in analysis, we can see we've got our percentage over here. So that was a fairly quick walkthrough. I've got one more complexity with column layouts to show you, but let's take a quick stop to see where we are with questions. Em?
Yep.
Emma, you still there?
I am. Let's see. We've got, are there any pre-built reports in the system, or do you need to create the layout each time before running a report?
Once you create it, it's there, so you'll be able to use it going forward. Your database will come with predefined column layouts. We can't provide you with predefined row layouts because they're based off your accounts, your GL accounts, and everybody's chart of account is different, so we can't create those in advance, but the column layouts, we do several of those.
And I think that's all we've got right now, Jessica. Oh,
okay.
Yep. We're all set.
Okay. All right, so let's take a look. There's one more feature I want to talk about. So I have defined this column layout here to have a different column for each one of my program values. Excuse me, getting a little tongue-tied, I guess. Program is one of my dimensions, and so I'm filtering for each column. This has the same limitation that the row layout has, though. If I add a dimension value, I would have to come in here and enter it manually. We do have a workaround, or not a workaround, but a feature that makes that easier, though. So if I take a look, where did I put it? Right, looks like I accidentally deleted it. All right, so the feature I want to talk about is this repeat by and the repeat by line numbers. What this allows you to do is to define an overall line or two. I'm going to go ahead and do two. And make sure I set my transaction type. So I'm going to repeat by a dimension. It's going to give you an option of your dimensions or your fund. This time I'm going to do program. And the lines I want to repeat are 100 through 200. Okay? Oops. And it would help if I put 2 dots instead of 1 in my field for range. All right. So when I click analysis, what it's giving me is budget and actuals for each one of my program dimension values. If I add a dimension, I don't have to do anything because this is doing this automatically. I can filter it down if I want to see just some. If I have validate or user access rules, so maybe a user can only see certain values, that this would respect that. If I want to see everything, I enter an asterisk. One little tip, if you come in here and there's nothing in that repeat by filter, it's actually just going to give you those core columns. You have to actually come in here sometimes and enter the asterisk or a filter of some kind. One of the main restrictions with this, however, is that you can't export to Excel. It doesn't do this on the fly. It displays this on the fly, calculating what are the different columns needed given the different values in your repeat by option, and it just can't translate that to exporting to Excel. So it's a very nice feature and it saves you from the manual update, but just understand that you don't have that export to Excel option that you would have in another column layout. All right, so, and I could have as many repeat by if I wanted to add another one for the variance like we did with the other column layout. Formula, and I'm going to take budget minus actual, then change this to say I want to see 1 to 3. When I go to analysis, now I'm getting by each dimension value my budget to actual and the variance. All right, so another quick pause before I move to the next topic. Any additional questions?
Yeah, it looks like something's come in. Let me just get it down here. For an Excel download, would one use the previous report column by program?
Yeah. To be able to export to Excel, you would use one where you had laid it out. Sorry, let me actually get into the definition. Where you had laid it out manually. This, from analysis, would export to Excel.
Great. Okay. And that's the only question I see right now, Jessica.
All right. So I want to move to the next topic, which is going to be actually how to use these row and column layouts to build your KPI charts. And to do that, I've created a row layout, and I want to show you a nice little, I don't want to use the word trick. It's just another way of approaching things. So I have added an account that I call attendance. And this isn't available for all OneNFP Lite clients, but for OneNFP Financials clients, you can actually import transactions that are statistical or provisional rather than just actual and budget. So if I clear filter on this attendance account that I created, my little sample data, my sample company is set up like it does after-school tutoring for kids. So I've created this to track the actual numeric count of number of kids who attended per week at a couple of different locations. Okay, so I'm going to use that. So that was a statistical entry. So when I come in here and I'm looking at this, These are filtering by transaction types, so we don't see a column for statistical, so we do have to drill down to see that and then clear the filter on transaction type. So let's come back to my row layout and take a look at that for a moment. So what I'm doing, I'm taking a look at a couple of expense accounts that I have that are specific to my tutoring program. Then I'm totaling this. If I wanted, I could actually, instead of using the row number to add the two rows together, I could use the account and change that to posting. That would give me the same result. So when you're working with this, just know there's a couple of different ways you can approach it, however you want to think about it when you're looking at it. This would give you the same amount. Then I'm going and collecting the statistical entries here using transaction type filter, the attendance entries, and I'm creating an average amount per attendee for my reporting period. So if I take a look at this in analysis, let's change this. There, where I know I've got attendance data. And I didn't want to use that one. Let's use just balance a date. Come on. Oh, no. Hang on just a second. Let's do current period. There, that just gives me a simple, straightforward look at this period. So for December, I spent this much in books and on tutoring materials. I had 345 different kids come to the tutoring, which gave me a average cost of 58.02. If I change my reporting period, it's actually going to change the average because I have a lot more kids coming in. So just a nice idea of how you can use statistical entries or provisional entries in your reports. You don't have to have, these reports aren't just restricted to financial data. So now that you've seen that row and column layout, I'm going to use that to create a chart. So when you come here to your key performance indicators and select chart, you're going to get a list. Some of these are ones that we defined, and some are ones that came from the underlying Microsoft product that we build on. For example, this sales value one. If you pick one of these and click Edit, it will actually tell you that you can't change that one because it's one of the underlying ones. But any other one that you create, for example, this expenses by program is one that I created, and I can open that up and edit it. So just know when you're selecting these, you might get a different message depending on whether you've picked one of those underlying charts. So I'm going to go ahead and click Create New Chart, and this is going to be average tutoring cost. This name is actually what's going to show on the Role Center. You can add a description that gives you a little more information, but the description isn't what shows up on the Role Center, it's the name. Now you pick your row layout. So we created that one by attendance that I want to use, and column layout. I'm going to keep it simple, and a lot of times I think you may want that as well, but you may sometimes want a budget to actual or something like that. But I'm going to keep it simple and use the current period column layout. So you saw right away it picked my rows and it added the name of the column to the line here. Base axis on, you can, this account schedule line and account schedule column, that's actually referring to the row layout and the column layout. You can base the columns that you have in your chart on your row and column layouts. I would suggest that you stick with period most of the time. The results you get when you pick one of these are just a little different than you might anticipate. So I'm going to stick with period. I'm going to start this on October 1 because that's where I know I've posted my attendance data. My period length, day is pretty granular. I'm going to actually make this week, and I'm going to show 12 weeks. Okay. Now, the next step, my row and column layouts were pretty simple. I had 5 rows in the row layout and a single column in the column layout. The KPIs can only show you 6 data points per period. So I've got weeks that I'm showing. I can show 6 data points. So you may have a row layout that is much more detailed, but there's a whole bunch of rows that you can't actually show. So when you go to Manage and Edit, now you're seeing all of them. You would see a list and you'd be able to, in fact, actually, let me change my row layout for a second to show you exactly what I'm talking about. So if I pick Expenses by Detail, I have all these rows, but I can only have 6 columns per week that I'm showing. So you have to come in here and then pick which ones. So in this case, I would probably pick totaling accounts to show in the chart. So let's switch back to the one that I wanted to use and edit. And I actually don't think, let's see, let's not bother showing the detail lines, but we'll show the total expenses, the attendance, and the per attendance expenses. All right, so now we've got it defined, so we can close this. I want to mention this because I do it all the time. The chart that I added is down here, but my selection is still up here. So if I just click OK, it's going to show expenses by column. It's like selecting that to show. So now I need to select average tutoring cost and click OK, and now we've got a chart. And we can add or hide different pieces of the chart. Now let's go back into it and do a little bit of editing. So average cost, let's click Edit. Week, let's say that is a little too granular. Let's go ahead and take it to month, but instead of 12, let's do 3. And I could change the start date if I wanted to. Another thing I want to do, let's change that and clean up how it looks when I'm looking at the chart. Whoops. All right, so click Close. That's selected. I click OK. So now that looks a little cleaner. This gives us a little bit more information. The expenses, though, that's kind of throwing it off. So let's go ahead and select Chart again, and let's remove that one. So now we'll just have the attendance and the per attendance expense. So we can see attendance 522 for the month of October with a per attendee expense of $24.99. So you can see how you can start to play with them. You can start using those rows and the columns to create your charts. So how about questions?
Hi, Jessica. We had a question come in a few minutes ago, so I apologize if we have to backtrack. If I create attendance in the chart of accounts, do I have to define it as a statistical type there?
The GL account? No, the GL account is just the same as any other GL account. It's the transaction types that you enter. So when I went to Gen Journal, I actually picked this statistical template to post statistical journals, statistical transactions. If I had picked budget, I'd be posting budget. If I pick actual, I'm posting actual entries. So that's how I got statistical entries into the system. The GL account itself doesn't need to have anything different about it.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
It looks like that answered the question, and I don't have any additional questions that have come in.
Okay. All right, we are a little faster than I thought I'd be. I seem to do this every time, Emily. I just fly through it way too quickly.
Well, you just get so excited.
I know, I get so excited about this stuff. That's kind of sad, isn't it? All right, so I have run through the things I wanted to talk about today. Let's open it up. Are there any other questions or kinds of reports that someone wants to be able to produce that I might help you see how you could use the user-defined reports to create? And while people are thinking that through, let's go back to the row and column layouts. And I think most clients have seen this before, but if I go ahead and click Analysis, I can memorize that to the My Reports section. So expenses by attendance, that's a good name. Go ahead and click Yes. When I come back here, I now have expenses by attendance, and I can open that up directly and change my parameters if I want to, or show hide, or export to Excel. Again, there's the limitation if the column layout is defined with repeat by, but something like this example I could push out to Excel. I can add filtering. Okay. Let's see, what else?
We did have a couple questions.
One other feature to go ahead and show you. Oh, sure. Let's hit the questions first.
Okay. Can we run a report on dimension value to see how much is a balance in each dimension?
Yes. So let's take a look at remember the row layouts always work off of an account. So if we take a look at by fund, let's go back to this one. I'm looking at a range of accounts, so we can use fund here, but it would work the same way for dimension. So I'm looking at from my net asset to my revenue and expense, through my revenue and expense, but I'm filtering by fund. If I wanted to change that around, these lines could be dimensions, and I could have a filter by dimension. I could also have the column layouts be my dimensions. It really just depends on what it is you're looking at. So if we look at a column where we had the by program, this time it's the columns that are the programs. So if I look at, let's make this my expense detail. So I'm looking at my expense accounts individually, and then each individual dimension, program dimension. So there's a couple of different ways to do that depending on exactly what it is you are trying to accomplish, how you have that pictured in your head, that end report.
Great. And then there was another one, Jessica. Is there a way to copy an entire user-defined report so that you may change some parameters without having to restart from the beginning?
Yeah, you can always, I want to make sure I'm answering the question, so if I don't quite get it right, please let me know. First of all, when you've got a row and column layout, you can copy that. So let's say I want to do this with one more total column and I want to have two to pick from. I can just copy it and with a well, that only allows for 10 characters. So now I've got one in my column layout. Let's refresh the page so it gets, so now I've got by total. It's an exact copy of the other one, and I can add, change it, and tweak it as I want to. When you put these together and create a report, from my reports, there really isn't a way to copy that, but if I wanted to, you just come in here and change, let's say I want to do a budget to actual version, and I just memorize that. And now I've got a new report here. Okay, did that help? Okay, other questions, Em?
Yeah, and it looks like that did answer that question. It says, if I have a good standard report, which I like to share with specific users, for example, all managers, how do I do this? Or,
so when you do the,
oops, I'm sorry, there's a follow-up, or can all users see all reports?
So all users can see all reports. When they come in, they can, if they want to come in here and pick any of the row and column layouts, they can do that. But usually what we recommend for something like you're talking about where you have managers is that when you memorize this, you can so I've got my name picked here, so I'm the only one who can see that. If I add a name, like let's say I add my boss, it's now going to show up for both of us. If I leave that blank, it's now going to show up for every user who comes into the system in the My Reports section. So these two I saved just for me, so I'll be the only one who sees that. Brandon or everybody who logs in will see this one. And when you memorize these, you can also memorize, so let's say we've got by attendance, and I've got, this is not necessarily going to make sense with the data I have in here, but let's say I want to filter cost center by 100, and I'm going to memorize that for Brandon. Okay, then I'm going to change this and memorize that combination for, let's see, Jane. So when Jane logs in, she's going to see this report. She's going to click on it. It's going to be pre-filtered for her specific settings. So you can have that one manager report and then distribute it, memorize it for different managers with different filter settings. How are we on questions, Em?
That
Good?
catches, yeah, we're all caught up on questions, Jessica, right now.
Okay. All right, let's do one last feature, take a look at. When you're in the Role Center and you click Report, and this is the main accounting staff Role Center, there's this user-defined reports. So when you produce reports and you use the report to print out to a PDF or an Excel file, whatever, you can always pick whatever combination of row and column you want. The challenge with that sometimes, so let's go ahead and print one. We'll pick user-defined report, and we're going to pick portrait. And so let's take that off for a second. So I've got a row layout and a column layout, and I've got my date range, and I'm going to preview this on screen. So when I produce this, and I could send this out to PDF or Word or Excel, the title I have on the report is coming from the description of the row layout and the description of the column layout. That doesn't always make sense for the title of a report. So if there's a report that you run commonly, a combination of row and column, you can come in here and actually define that combination and give it a title. So if I produce this report and I pick here in report, which is that combination I defined, same row and column layout, but when I go ahead and produce it, I get an extra title here that allows you to give a more formal title to that combination of row and column layout. It's just an option for you to use. You don't have to make combinations, formal combinations, for every match of row and column, because it's always on the fly. You can change what the combination is. But this just gives you a nice extra option for giving a specific title to a specific combination of row and column layouts. And one last, so let's take a look. We've got user-defined report by dimension, and then just user-defined report. And then portrait and landscape, that's going to be based on how wide your column layout is. And I forget what the threshold is. I believe it is identified in the online help, though. But the distinction here between this pair of bi-dimension ones versus the straight ones. So let's go ahead and pick user-defined report, and I'm going to pick my expense detail and balance at date. Okay? Preview that. So this is a flat report, and this is giving me everything. If I had wanted to filter by fund, I would enter that when I entered when I created. I could filter by a specific fund or one of my dimensions. What the by-dimension reports give you is the ability to have a page break and to change on the different combinations of a fund or dimension. So I've picked my column layout, let's change that. That's remembered from the last time I ran this. So what did we do? We did balance of date, and my row layout is expense detail. So we've got the same entry, and I'm going to do, what did I do, 12/31/14. Okay. So up here, this is the trick. This is where you can define, let's say I want to get a page change for every cost center. And I could pick a combination of these, and actually let's go ahead and we'll do cost center and program. So it's telling me cost center and program. When I preview this, and here we go, it's going to give me a different page for every combination of cost center and program. So this can be kind of nice if you want to zip this into a PDF and maybe manually distribute pages or produce a report. As I page through this, you're going to see each combination. So we're going to go through all 100s with different program codes. Then it's going to move to the cost center 200 and walk through and give you, so you can see like my sample data, that may mean you have a blank page, my sample data being somewhat limited, but that's a nice feature, and that's the distinction between this by dimension version of these reports and just the straight report. All right, questions?
No, Jessica, we don't have any new questions right now.
All right, well, thank you all very much for attending. This will get posted up on our YouTube channel so you can refer to it. We also have a series of videos out on the YouTube channel on the user-defined reports, so I encourage you to take a look out there. We've been spending quite a bit of time lately trying to bulk up the content on that YouTube channel, so take a look anytime. And contact us at support@OneNFP if you have any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jess. Great session.